With the Asics Novablast 5 launching on December 1st, many runners are asking themselves the age-old question, do I get the new model or do I buy the last year's model on discount? Let's break down the differences between the Asics Novablast 4 and 5. What's up everybody, I'm Eric McIntyre, aka Rad Dad Bod, and you're watching Rad Dad Bod TV, where we review running shoes. Today we're going to be breaking down the differences between the Asics Novablast 4 and 5 to hopefully be able to help you guys make the decision on whether you should go with the new model or settle for last year's model at a discount. Now, if it's your first time here, you may notice some timestamps in the description below. Feel free to jump around throughout the review and this comparison so you can find what you're looking for, but if you do so, I would sure appreciate it if you came back, watch the full video when you get a sec, as I put a lot of time and effort into making these as good as possible for each and every one of you. And if you have some feedback, feel free to drop it in the comments below, as I'm always trying to get better as a reviewer and make these videos even better. Now, before we get into the meat of this comparison, I do want to give some disclaimers and disclosures, which are I actually received the Novablast 5 directly from my local running store, who received it directly from Asics. That being said, no one gets to watch these videos beforehand, no one is paying me for this, no one tells me what I need to say, anything along those lines. All thoughts are entirely my own. Now, as far as the Novablast 4 goes, I actually did buy this with my own money, but I did get a discount from my local running store. So with disclaimers out of the way, let's get to the comparison itself. Now, for those unfamiliar, the Novablast is kind of a daily trainer or potentially lightweight daily trainer. It's one of the more versatile shoes on the market and tends to be a crowd favorite. The shoe's built to handle bulk miles, but also can go a little bit faster and feels very, very comfortable in that tempo and threshold range. But as far as like interval workouts go, it's probably not the right shoe for you, but often has enough cushion to be able to go long. So again, very, very versatile overall. Now, as far as the differences between the 4 and the 5, let's talk first about price. Now, really nice, the Novablast 5 is coming in at the $140 price point, which is, I believe, the same price that the Novablast 4 was upon launch. But with the release of the Novablast 4 is dropping to about $110 on most retailers. Now, from a specs perspective, both shoes are going to be very, very similar. So you have 41.5 in the heel, 33.5 in the forefoot in the 5 for an 8mm heel to toe drop, and you've got 41 in the heel and 33 in the forefoot for an 8mm heel to toe drop in the 4. So you have maybe a 0.5mm difference in the two shoes, but I got the specs for the 4 off of Running Warehouse, and they don't yet have their independent measurements for the 5, and so I grabbed the measurements of the 5 off of Asics website. Now, from a weight perspective, I'm seeing that both shoes are coming in at the same exact weight of 9 ounces or 255 grams. So they should feel similar or identical on foot from a weight perspective. As far as fit goes, I do find that both shoes fit true to size lengthwise. I have heard that some people had to half size down in the 4, and I do think that the 5 fits a little bit sleeker. I would assume that most people were half sizing down in the 4 just because it is a little bit roomy or wide throughout the shoe, and I do feel like, again, the 5 feels a little bit more sleek. There's a little bit less overall room. It fits a little bit better, and I would call it more of an average fit while still being accommodating. I'm not sure how easy it is to tell on video, but to me, when I look at the toe boxes and I look at the overall profiles of the shoe, the 4 does seem a little bit wider for the most part. Now, one of the more significant updates to the Novablast 5 compared to the Novablast 4 is going to be in the upper. The 4 used an engineered woven upper. Meanwhile, as we transition to the 5, we have what is called an engineered jacquard mesh. Now, the main thing I notice in the uppers is that, again, I do feel like the 5 fits just a little bit more sleek overall. But as far as breathability goes, I found that they were fairly similar, maybe with the 5 being a tiny bit more breathable. They both have a similar tongue construction with kind of that minimal, lightly cushioned tongue, as well as those pull tabs to make it for an easy on experience. And both uppers still have that fairly cushioned heel, which is very, very comfortable, very, very plush, but maybe adding a little bit more weight than it needs to the shoe. Now, it's winter here in Utah right now, and so it's pretty cold in the mornings when I go out and run, and so I haven't really noticed any significant heat retention in the shoe compared to the Novablast 4, where I put a lot of the miles in the shoe on in Hawaii in kind of the humid heat. And so I would assume, just based off of the amount of cushion in the 5, that it's still going to run a little bit warm, but I do think the jacquard mesh, like I said, is going to be slightly more breathable. So something to consider. Maybe this is a better winter shoe than it is summer, just because of that overall plush and heat in the shoe. Now, moving to the midsoles, you had an FF Blast Eco in the 4, and now we have FF Blast Max in the 5, which is supposed to be a lighter, more responsive overall foam. My overall experience in these two shoes so far, and keep in mind, I don't have a ton of miles on the 5 yet. We've only had a handful of runs. But for the most part, I found that the 4 was very soft, very plush, but had the ability to pick up and felt really, really comfortable moderately. Through a couple of runs, I found that the 5 feels slightly firmer, though not significantly firmer, but seems to have a little bit more rebound. The other thing is the heel flare has kind of calmed down a little bit in the shoe, and so it just feels like a little bit more sleek, a little bit more streamlined of a shoe. So while it's not really going to be an interval shoe by any means, it may be able to handle a little bit better, some faster paces, maybe more like some strides. While again, I really, really liked the Novablast 4 for that 10 zone. The 5 may be able to pick up a little bit more, but is just not going to be like a hard workout shoe by any means either. Overall though, I do prefer the Novablast 5 foam. I do feel like it's a pretty good upgrade, and so far in talking about the shoe, I do feel like the upgrades in the 5 are worth it. Though subtle, they do add to the experience of the shoe and make it a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more versatile in my mind so far. Moving to the outsoles, both shoes have high abrasion rubber, but the 5 specifically calls out a slightly softer version of a high abrasion rubber. So I'm not sure if it's the exact same softness between the two, but it is the same compound for the most part. For me, I found that this rubber was really, really secure. It could handle some somewhat wet roads. It will probably do pretty good in winter running for the most part. Obviously, you're not going to be able to run on ice, but that's the case with most running shoes. So I don't think that there's any significant upgrade or change in the outsole. It's pretty solid overall. Now, one quick thing I want to call out just in the outsole of the shoe, I did not like the outsole of the 2. There was something about kind of this middle section here. I felt like it kind of bulged out and created a really weird underfoot feeling in that forefoot. So, but with the 4 and the 5, that wasn't an issue for me. So if you kind of felt that weird anomaly, because I know a lot of people really love the Novablast 2, that is not present in the 4 and the 5. Now, overall, is it worth it in my mind to upgrade to the 5 over the 4? To me, I think that the 5 is a good enough upgrade that it does make sense for most running enthusiasts. But if you're maybe just getting into running and you're looking for a really good shoe at a really, really reasonable price, that's where you may want to stick with the 4, because at like $110, that shoe is a steal. But for runners who have shoe rotations, who have many shoes like myself, and who are looking for the latest and greatest, I do feel like the Novablast 5 is a big enough step up that it justifies paying the full price of $140, which, let's be honest, when it comes to running shoes, is still very, very reasonable, very, very affordable. So this is a high value shoe at that price. Now, for those Novablast loyalists, what may convince you to stick with the 4 over the 5? I think that it comes down to kind of, again, that plush factor. If you really like the really soft midsole of the 4, if you like kind of the plush overall feeling, or if you like a slightly more accommodating fit and you're just using this primarily for like easy miles, you don't really care about the upper end versatility of the shoe, then it may be worth it just to get the Novablast 4 again and stock up on a few models. I think that the 5 is similar enough though that you're to be upset if you can't get the 4 anymore. So there you go. That's a breakdown between the Novablast 4 and the Novablast 5. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if there's anything I missed, or anything that I could be doing better in these videos to make them more informative for each and every one of you. And as always, with a question, which is, are you going to be stocking up on the Novablast 4, or are you going to take the leap and buy the Novablast 5? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everybody.